Melissa Gilbert. She was America's sweetheart, but behind the smile was a life filled with heartbreak, silence, and survival. Millions watched Melissa Gilbert grow up on screen, never knowing how much she was fighting off-screen. This is not the story of a child star. It's the story of a woman who lost herself, rebuilt herself, and finally found peace on her own terms. Before the world loved her, life had already tested her harder than fame ever would. Before America loved her, life had already tested her harder than fame ever would. Melissa Gilbert grew up in front of millions, but behind the camera, she was shaped by loneliness, confusion, and a search for belonging that started before she could even walk. She became a familiar face in American homes, yet her real story was never only about fame or success. It was about a girl trying to understand why love felt distant, why stability never lasted, and why she had to be strong long before she was ready. Her journey was marked by early abandonment, the pressure of sudden fame, and the kind of heartbreak that leaves long shadows. But she learned to hold on, to keep moving, and to carry hope even when life gave her every reason to quit. Melissa's life shows how someone can be smiling on the outside and still be fighting battles that no one can see. Her rise to fame made her a symbol of innocence and strength, but it also came with emotional costs that the audience never noticed. She would face broken relationships, loss, physical pain, and the weight of expectations that tried to define her. What makes her story special is not that she became a star, but that she kept rebuilding herself each time life tried to break her. She would fall, rise again, fall once more, and still choose to stand. This is a story of a woman who lived many lives in one lifetime, who was forced to grow up faster than most, and who searched for peace in a world that rarely allowed her to rest. She went from being a child, craving love, to a young woman lost in fame, to an adult who finally found strength within herself. But before she found the world, she first had to survive her beginning. Some children are born into love. Melissa was born into silence. She entered the world on the 8th of May, 1964, in Los Angeles. But her biological parents did not keep her. Within a day, she was placed for adoption, and her life began with questions she could not ask, and answers she would not learn for many years. Being given away at birth left an emotional imprint she did not understand as a child, but the feeling of not being chosen stayed with her. She was adopted by actor and comedian Paul Gilbert and his wife Barbara Crane, a dancer and actress. On paper, it looked like a loving start, but even in her earliest years, she felt a quiet distance she could not explain. Her home was filled with rehearsals, show business routines, and the constant pressure of career life, but not the steady warmth that makes a child feel safe. Melissa wanted attention and closeness, yet love in that house often competed with ambition. As she grew, she sensed tension between her adoptive parents. Their marriage was cracking, and she was forced to watch the slow collapse of the only family she knew. Arguments replaced laughter, and she learned to stay quiet, as if silence could keep the peace. When her parents finally divorced, she was still very young. The separation shook her sense of security, and she began moving with her mother from place to place, never fully settling. Her father, Paul, who had once been her source of comfort, became a distant voice instead of a steady presence. She tried to hold on to him, but visits grew fewer, and phone calls became shorter, until one day even those stopped. She didn't understand why love could disappear so easily, or why the people she trusted could suddenly be gone. When Melissa was only 11, she was told that her father had died from a sudden medical issue. She believed the explanation, because she wanted to believe it. She missed him deeply and cried herself to sleep, holding on to the memory of the only parent who had made her feel safe. For years, she carried that grief, speaking to his photograph and imagining he was taken by fate, not choice. But as she got older, she found out the truth. Her father had taken his own life. The lie that was meant to protect her ended up leaving an even deeper wound. She had lost him once when he drifted away, and she lost him again when she learned how he really died. The reality broke her in a way she could not express. She was left with abandonment at birth, instability in childhood, and a loss that shattered her trust in the world. And just when she thought life couldn't take more from her, fate struck again. She didn't chase fame. Fame came for her. After her father's death, Melissa tried to stay busy, and her mother pushed her toward child auditions. She was small, shy, and still hurting inside, but acting became a way to cope. She went from studio to studio, waiting in crowded halls with other children who wanted the same dream. Most days ended with rejection, and she learned very early how to smile through disappointment. Casting agents often said she was too plain or not the type, and each rejection made her more aware that she had to work twice as hard to be noticed. Instead of giving up, she developed a survival mentality. Acting became the only place where effort sometimes paid off, and she kept going, hoping someone would finally see her for who she was. That moment came when she auditioned for a new television series called Little House on the Prairie. The team was searching for a girl who could play Laura Ingalls, a character full of spirit, honesty, and heart. Melissa did not walk in with confidence, but there was something natural in the way she read the lines. She didn't pretend to be Laura, she simply connected with her. Michael Landon, the show's star and producer, saw it immediately and chose her for the role. Overnight, her life changed. Within months, she became the nation's daughter, and millions of viewers welcomed her into their homes every week. People felt close to her, admired her, and believed they knew her. For them, she was the brave, warm, hopeful girl on screen. For Melissa, it felt like she finally had a place where she belonged, at least professionally. But the attention came with a cost. Fame did not care about her age or her emotions. While other children went to school, played in parks, or celebrated simple birthdays, Melissa worked long hours on set. She memorized lines, filmed emotional scenes, and carried the weight of a hit show on her small shoulders. Everywhere she went, strangers recognized her, yet she often felt invisible in her real life. Fans loved Laura, not Melissa. The world praised her talent, but that praise never filled the emptiness she carried from her childhood. At home, she still dealt with distance, instability, and a lack of emotional support. She smiled for cameras, laughed in interviews, and acted with joy, but much of it was a performance beyond the script. The more famous she became, the lonelier she felt. She was surrounded by people on set, but she didn't have a true space to speak about her pain. She feared that if she showed weakness, she would lose the only thing giving her life direction. So she pushed her feelings down and stayed focused on work. Public love could not replace private comfort. America saw a happy, glowing girl growing up on television, but they did not see the child who went home tired, overwhelmed, and wishing someone would hold her without expecting anything in return. She was becoming a star, but she was also becoming emotionally isolated. The applause was loud, but the silence after it was even louder. The world celebrated her success, and she kept giving them reasons to cheer. But while America saw laughter, no one noticed what was breaking. Underneath, millions watched her grow up. No one saw her growing pain. As Little House on the Prairie became a national hit, Melissa was praised, admired, and protected by fame, but not protected as a child. The schedule was demanding, and her life no longer belonged to her. She worked long hours, memorized pages of dialogue, and carried emotional scenes that were heavy even for adults. There was no time for normal childhood moments, no space to ask who she really was, and no room to rest when she was hurting inside. She wanted to please everyone, and she felt pressure to always smile, always perform, and never disappoint. While America saw her as joyful and strong, she was quietly learning that her worth depended on how well she played a role. The emotional cost of being a child star began to show in ways she did not understand. She had to grow up faster than she should have, stepping into adult expectations long before she was emotionally ready. She learned to hide her real feelings because she feared that honesty might threaten her position. Birthdays were spent on set, friendships outside of work were rare, and her whole identity became tied to Laura Ingalls. She started losing the line between the character and herself. The more loved Laura became, the harder it was for Melissa to know who Melissa was. When people looked at her, they only saw the role. When they spoke to her, they spoke to the character. She felt appreciated for her performance, not for her heart. Exhaustion became part of her daily life. She woke up early, worked all day, and went home drained. There was no chance to pause and explore her own interests or fears. The studio's expectations controlled her schedule, her image, and sometimes even her emotions. She did what she was told because she didn't want to lose the only world that had accepted her. But the acceptance was conditional. Fame cheered when she was perfect and had no patience for her weaknesses. Slowly, she learned to silence herself, and ignore her own needs. The girl who made millions feel comfort and joy was not receiving that same comfort in return. Fame looked bright from the outside, but to her, it started to feel like a cage. It gave her visibility, but took away freedom. It gave her applause, but took away privacy. It gave her purpose, but took away childhood. She could not run, she could not hide, and she could not take off the mask without risking everything she had built. Inside, she felt trapped by expectations she never asked for. She became a symbol of happiness for others, even when she could not find happiness for herself. The world believed she had everything, yet she felt increasingly empty. The more she succeeded, the more isolated she became. When Little House on the Prairie finally neared its end, Melissa was emotionally tired, confused about her identity, and unprepared for what came next. She had lived in a role for so long that she did not know how to live outside it. She feared that without Laura, she might become invisible again. But the reality waiting for her after the show would be even harder than the years in front of the camera. And soon, when the lights finally went out, she would face her darkest silence yet. Hollywood loves you loudly and forgets you quietly. When Little House on the Prairie ended, Melissa suddenly found herself without the structure that had shaped her entire youth. For years, she woke up with a script, a schedule, and a purpose. Now there were no call times, no scenes to rehearse, and no character to become. The applause that once filled her life stopped overnight, and she was forced to face a question she had never been able to answer. Who was she without Laura Ingalls? She felt lost, as if she had been pushed out of a world that no longer needed her. The studios that once chased her were now silent. Casting directors struggled to see her as anything besides the little girl from the prairie, and she struggled to prove she could be more. The identity crisis hit her harder than she expected. She had spent her entire childhood being told where to stand, how to speak, and what to feel for the camera. Now she had to make choices for herself, and she didn't know where to begin. The world saw her as a former child star, not a grown actress, and offers became rare. She tried auditioning for adult roles, but her past followed her everywhere. Producers would smile politely, praise her history, and still choose someone else. Each rejection echoed the same painful message she had once heard as a child. "You're not what we want." The difference now was that she had no spotlight to hide behind. With the show gone, loneliness returned in full force. She missed the cast, the routine, and the feeling of belonging. She no longer had a second family on set, and the quiet of her home felt heavier than ever. She tried to stay busy, but the empty spaces in her life grew larger. She felt pressure to reinvent herself, yet she didn't know how to start. The fame that had once made her feel special now felt like a label she couldn't peel off. She was too well known to be anonymous and too typecast to move forward. It was a strange prison, one built not of criticism, but of memory. Her confidence began to shrink, and she longed for emotional connection more than applause. She wanted someone to see her, not the character she used to play. With her career uncertain and her identity shaken, she became vulnerable to the one escape she believed might fill the emptiness: love. She hoped that a relationship could give her the security and belonging she no longer found in her work. But the path she chose next would not lead to healing. In that silence, she went searching for love and found heartbreak waiting. She thought she'd finally been chosen. She was wrong. When Melissa met Rob Lowe, she was young, hopeful, and eager to feel loved for who she was, not for a character she once played. Rob was charming, popular, and already rising fast in Hollywood. When he paid attention to her, she felt seen in a way she had never felt before. Their relationship grew quickly, filled with long talks, laughter, and promises that felt safe at first. Melissa believed she had finally found someone who understood her heart. After years of loneliness and uncertainty, she allowed herself to imagine a future that looked warm and stable. She fell deeply in love, and for the first time, she thought she was building something real beyond the spotlight. Their connection, however, was built during a time when both of their lives were moving at high speed. Hollywood was full of pressure, temptation, and attention from every direction. Even though Melissa tried to hold on, small cracks began to form. Arguments replaced jokes, and doubts replaced excitement. She tried to ignore the changes because she didn't want to lose her first real love. She held on tighter, hoping things would return to the way they were. Then, everything shifted when she found out she was pregnant. Instead of panic, she felt relief and joy. In her heart, this child meant family, stability, and a second chance at love. She imagined a home of her own, a wedding, and a new beginning that would finally give her the emotional grounding she never had as a child. But Rob was not ready for the life she was suddenly planning. The pregnancy created distance instead of unity. Melissa hoped he would change his mind, but his fear of commitment only grew stronger. Their future, once clear in her imagination, quickly fell apart. Before she could build the home she dreamed of, she found herself alone again, facing the end of the relationship she believed would last forever. The breakup was painful, but what came next crushed her completely. Melissa lost the baby, and with that loss, every hope she had tied to motherhood and stability collapsed. She faced grief on two levels: the end of her relationship and the end of a life she had already begun to love. The pain was deeper than anything she had ever felt. She had wanted a family, a partner, and a future she could count on. Instead, she was left with silence, confusion, and a heartbreak that stayed with her long after the relationship ended. She tried to carry herself with strength, but inside, she was broken. Losing Rob was painful, but losing the baby was a wound that cut into her identity as a woman, a partner, and a dreamer. It forced her to confront loss in a way she hadn't experienced since childhood. Yet even in her sorrow, she still longed for love. She still hoped for connection. She still wanted to believe that her story could change. Because the heart, once shattered, does not stop seeking what broke it. She finally had a home until the walls began to crack. After the painful end of her first great love, Melissa wanted stability more than anything. When she met actor Beau Brinkman, she believed she had found a partner who would give her the steady life she had always hoped for. Their connection was fast and intense, and she convinced herself that love could heal her old wounds. In 1988, they got married, and for a short time, she felt protected. When their son, Dakota Paul Brinkman, was born in 1989, her world seemed complete. Motherhood gave her a purpose she had never experienced. Holding her child, she finally felt she belonged to someone who wouldn't leave. She poured her heart into being a wife and mother, hoping she had built something solid at last. But the happiness did not last. The pressures of work, personal differences, and unresolved emotional pain began to surface in their marriage. Melissa wanted peace, but the relationship was full of ups and downs. Instead of support, she often found herself dealing with conflict and distance. The warmth she once felt in her home slowly faded, and she became aware that they were growing apart. She tried to fix things, hoping that love and patience could hold the marriage together. But the problems only deepened. Trust weakened. Arguments replaced affection. The emotional safety she had prayed for began to crumble. Infidelity entered the picture, and the damage was something the marriage could not recover from. Melissa felt betrayed and alone, even though she was still sharing a home with her husband. She had wanted a partnership built on loyalty and care, but instead, she found herself fighting for attention and honesty. The distance between them became impossible to ignore. She tried to hide her pain and stay strong for Dakota, but inside she was breaking all over again. She had entered the marriage hoping for a lifelong bond, yet she ended up carrying the same loneliness she thought she had escaped. Eventually, she realized she could not save what was already gone. The marriage collapsed, and Melissa was forced to face another ending she didn't want. Walking away was painful, but staying would have been worse. She chose to leave, becoming a single mother determined to give her son love and stability, even if she had to do it alone. The experience left her wiser, but also more guarded. She had gained the gift of motherhood, but she had lost the family she thought she had built. She walked away, not knowing the next chapter would test her even more. This time, she didn't fall in love. She grew into it. After her first marriage ended, Melissa wanted a calmer life, not driven by quick emotions or desperate hopes. When she reconnected with actor Bruce Boxleitner, the relationship began slowly. They talked, listened, and learned each other instead of rushing forward. Bruce was steady, mature, and respectful. For the first time, Melissa felt she could build something on patience instead of intensity. They married in 1995, and life soon brought them a blended family. Melissa became a stepmother to Bruce's sons, and later they welcomed a child of their own, Michael Garrett Boxleitner. For years, this chapter gave her a level of peace she had never experienced in love. It wasn't perfect, but it was stable, and she believed she had finally found her forever. The marriage grew on shared routines and teamwork. She balanced motherhood and acting, and Bruce focused on his career while trying to be present at home. They had holidays together, school events, and family decisions that made life feel normal and grounded. Melissa often said this was her most grown-up love, a calm partnership that helped her heal parts of herself she didn't realize were still hurting. She was no longer the young girl begging love to stay. She was a woman building a real home. The peace of that family life gave her hope that she could finally break the pattern of heartbreak and find long-term happiness. But even steady love can slowly drift. The pressures of work, long periods apart, and the natural distance that forms when communication weakens began to affect the marriage. There was no single moment of collapse, just small changes that added up over time. Conversations became shorter. Days felt heavier. Their emotional connection, once warm and dependable, began to cool in ways neither of them knew how to repair. They tried to keep the marriage strong, but it became clear that they wanted different things and were growing in different directions. Instead of arguing loudly, they pulled away quietly. The house still functioned, but the closeness was gone. Melissa kept trying, hoping the bond would return, but deep down, she felt the sadness of a relationship slowly slipping out of her hands. When the end finally came, it was not explosive or cruel. It was dignified, respectful, and honest. In 2011, after 16 years of marriage, they decided to part. Melissa had to accept that not all love stories end in disaster. Some simply reach their limit. This ending hurt her, but it also showed her how much she had changed. She didn't beg, she didn't break down, and she didn't lose herself. She walked away with maturity and gratitude for the years that worked. The marriage had given her a son, a family, and a version of peace she had never known before. But now it was time to start again, this time with a clearer sense of who she was and what she needed. She had survived heartbreak. Now her own body would turn against her. The girl who survived Hollywood now had to survive herself. After her second marriage ended, Melissa tried to move forward, but her body and mind were carrying years of stress, exhaustion, and unresolved pain. While appearing on Dancing with the Stars in 2012, she suffered a serious fall that left her with lasting spinal injuries. The pain was intense and constant, and surgery became unavoidable. The recovery was slow and frightening. For someone who had always pushed through every crisis, being physically limited was a shock. She was used to surviving emotional wounds, but now her body was failing her in ways she could not hide or ignore. The pain affected her mood, her confidence, and her daily life, and she began sinking into depression and anxiety. As the emotional strain grew, Melissa turned to alcohol to numb the emptiness and stress. The drinking was not about celebration, it was escape. She wanted silence from her thoughts, relief from pressure, and a break from the expectations that had shaped her for decades. At the same time, she was dealing with misophonia, a condition that made certain everyday sounds feel unbearable. Simple noises like chewing, tapping, or breathing could trigger anger, panic, or discomfort. This made social situations difficult and isolation easier. She tried to put on a brave face, but inside she was struggling with her health, her mind, and her sense of self. Making things harder was Hollywood's cruel attitude toward aging women. As she grew older, she watched the industry that once celebrated her with now look past her. Roles slowed down, comments about her appearance increased, and she felt judged for simply growing older. She battled insecurity, questioning her worth in a business that expects women to look young forever. She had spent her life being recognized for her face, and now that face was being criticized for changing. The pressure pushed her even deeper into anxiety and self-doubt. Melissa was fighting on multiple fronts: her body, her mental health, her addiction, and her identity. She felt trapped by expectations she could never meet again, and the pain, both physical and emotional, piled up without rest. She was tired of pretending to be strong. She was tired of trying to fit a Hollywood image that no longer matched who she was inside. She reached a breaking point where she knew she either had to change her life or lose herself completely. And then came the choice that changed everything: freedom over illusion. She removed more than implants. She removed the lie. After years of pain, pressure, and pretending, Melissa finally decided to stop living for an image she no longer believed in. She chose to remove her breast implants, a decision that symbolized far more than a medical change. For decades, she had felt pushed to look a certain way, to stay young, and to fit Hollywood's standards. The surgery represented her first real step towards self-acceptance. When she looked in the mirror afterward, she didn't see someone trying to fit in anymore. She saw herself natural, aging, and real. It was the beginning of a new chapter built on honesty, not illusion. With her body no longer trapped by expectations, Melissa began focusing on healing both inside and out. She worked to address her addiction, faced her anxiety, and learned to live with her misophonia instead of hiding from it. Therapy, personal reflection, and time away from Hollywood helped her understand how much pain she had carried since childhood. She started letting go of guilt, fear, and the belief that she always had to be perfect. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence, not from applause or attention, but from self-respect. She began choosing peace over pressure, health over image, and authenticity over performance. This emotional rebirth changed how she lived each day. She no longer wanted to chase roles or approval. She wanted a life that felt honest and calm. She took breaks, created healthier habits, and learned to set boundaries without feeling selfish. Instead of trying to be who others expected, she started becoming the woman she needed to be for herself. She accepted her age, her scars, and her story. She learned that beauty isn't found in perfection, but in truth. For the first time, she allowed herself to live without a mask. But as she began to rebuild her life with clarity and strength, something unexpected waited around the corner. She had found her identity and her voice again, but her story was not finished. Her heart, which had survived so much loss, was about to open once more in a way she never planned. But love wasn't done with her story yet. Some hearts bloom late, and that is their magic. After years of heartbreak, confusion, and emotional recovery, Melissa was no longer looking for love. She wasn't chasing romance, rescue, or validation. She was focused on rebuilding herself, staying sober, and learning how to live with peace instead of chaos. That was the moment life surprised her. When she met actor and director Timothy Busfield in 2012, their connection did not feel rushed or dramatic. It felt calm. He was kind, steady, and honest. And he didn't fall in love with her image or her past. He saw the woman she had become, not the girl she once played on television. With him, she didn't have to pretend, compete, or perform. She could breathe. Their relationship grew naturally, built on shared values, gentle humor, and mutual respect. In 2013, they got married, choosing a simple ceremony and a simple life instead of Hollywood flash. For the first time, Melissa felt she had found a partner, not a storm. Their marriage brought a sense of emotional safety she had never fully known. Timothy understood her struggles instead of judging them. He gave her space to be herself, and she did the same for him. They didn't live for attention or headlines. They wanted a life they could feel, not a life they could show. Together, they made the decision to step away from Hollywood's noise. They moved to a farmhouse in the Catskills of New York, where their days became slower and quieter. Instead of studios, red carpets, and chaos, Melissa now woke up to simpler routines. She planted vegetables, cared for her home, and lived without the pressure of beauty standards or public expectations. For the first time, peace wasn't a dream. It was her daily life. In that quiet setting, she rediscovered herself in a deeper way. She learned to enjoy ordinary moments, cooking with her husband, working on small home projects, writing, and spending time outdoors. She no longer needed applause to feel worthy. She no longer needed attention to feel seen. The simplicity of farm life gave her clarity and gratitude. She also built a healthier relationship with aging, accepting her face, her body, and her past without shame. The woman who once lived under Hollywood's microscope now lived on her own terms. She found joy in being present, not perfect. This chapter of her life did not erase her struggles, but it changed how she faced them. Melissa had finally found a love that was supportive instead of demanding, steady instead of unpredictable. She learned that real love is not built on drama or pain. It is built on trust, consistency, and kindness. She was grateful for a new beginning, one that honored her journey and allowed her to grow instead of break. But life still had challenges ahead. Peace does not mean life stops testing you. And when the world tested her one last time, she answered it with grace. For the first time, she was not performing. She was living. After settling into a quieter life, Melissa had to face one more painful reality of her finances were not in order. Years of unstable work, uneven income, and poor management had left her with serious tax debt. She owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS, and the situation could have destroyed her future. Instead of panicking or hiding, she chose responsibility. She sold her home, cut her expenses, and focused on paying off everything she owed. Melissa and Timothy lived simply and worked hard, rebuilding from the ground up. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it gave her a sense of control she had never felt in the past. She learned to value a humble, stable life over a flashy, stressful one. She began earning again, not through endless acting jobs, but through work that felt meaningful. She wrote books, sharing her experiences with honesty and courage. Her memoirs allowed her to connect with people in a deeper way, offering comfort and inspiration to those facing their own struggles. She also became more vocal about issues she cared about, using her platform to support women's health, mental wellness, and self-acceptance. Instead of chasing Hollywood's approval, she used her voice to help others feel seen and understood. She didn't want to be remembered only as a child star. She wanted to be remembered as someone who survived, learned, and gave back. In her new life, she discovered that freedom is not found in fame, wealth, or attention. Freedom is being able to live with peace, honesty, and self-respect. She was no longer defined by ratings, headlines, or expectations. She chose her days, her relationships, and her priorities with clarity. The farmhouse, the garden, the quiet routines, and her writing became symbols of a life she built by choice, not pressure. Melissa reinvented herself not by becoming someone new, but by finally becoming herself. She embraced her journey, her age, her body, and her truth, proving that strength is not about never falling, it's about always rising. She had survived abandonment, heartbreak, illness, addiction, and the harsh judgment of an industry known for breaking people. She came out the other side, not bitter, but wiser and softer. She built a legacy not of perfection, but of resilience. Still, one question remains as her story stands today. What, then, is Melissa Gilbert's true legacy? Her story isn't about fame, it's about becoming whole. Melissa Gilbert's life shows that a person can be loved by millions and still feel lost inside. Her journey is proof that identity is not built on applause, beauty, or success. It is built on knowing yourself, accepting your past, and choosing to grow even when life keeps breaking you. She survived abandonment, heartbreak, public scrutiny, and physical pain, yet she kept moving forward. Her story teaches that resilience is not the absence of suffering, it is the decision to keep standing, even when it hurts. For anyone who has ever felt forgotten, judged, or not enough, her life offers hope that healing is possible and that our beginnings do not decide our ending. Melissa also represents survival in a world that often demands perfection. She became a symbol of innocence on television, but as she grew older, she showed a different kind of strength. She admitted her struggles, faced her mistakes, and allowed herself to be vulnerable. Instead of hiding her flaws, she used them to help others feel less alone. Through her honesty, she gives people permission to stop pretending and start healing. Her story reminds us that we don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, and we don't need to follow society's expectations to live a meaningful life. She broke free from an image that once controlled her, showing that real freedom begins the moment we stop trying to be what others want and start becoming who we truly are. For a generation that watched her grow up on screen, Melissa represents both nostalgia and courage. She reminds viewers of a simpler time, yet her real life reveals the deeper truth behind childhood fame. People connected with her innocence as a girl, and now they connect with her strength as a woman. Many who grew up watching Little House on the Prairie see pieces of their own lives in her journey: dreams, disappointments, family struggles, and the search for peace. She holds a special place in American culture not because she stayed perfect, but because she stayed human. Her legacy is not a character or a show. It is the message that even after life breaks you, you can rebuild yourself with patience, faith, and honesty. In the end, Melissa Gilbert teaches us that healing takes time, self-worth is earned from within, and peace is more valuable than applause. She shows that you can start over at any age, love again after heartbreak, and build a life that feels true, even if the world once defined you by something else. Her life is a reminder that resilience is a quiet power, and becoming whole is a lifelong journey, not a single moment. She found her voice, her balance, and her freedom, and through her story, she encourages others to do the same. But one question remains: what do we carry from her story into our own lives? Melissa Gilbert's journey shows that even a life shaped by hardship can still lead to peace, purpose, and love. She grew up on our screens, she stumbled in front of the world, and she rebuilt herself with quiet strength. Her story reminds us that it is never too late to start again, and that healing is not about erasing the past, but learning to live with it in a healthier way. We watched a child star become a whole woman, one who chose honesty over perfection and peace over pressure. Her light didn't fade when the cameras turned away. It simply moved to a more genuine place, and that is where it now shines the brightest. Thank you for watching and walking through her story with us. If her journey touched you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here, and we would love to hear what part of her story stayed with you. The prairie sun sets, but the light remains, and so does the hope that all of us can find our own version of peace.